I want you to hit me as hard as you can.
Sylvester Stallone is among the biggest icons of our time. From Rocky to Rambo, very few actors have had as profound an impact on the pop culture as he has. Well into his 70s, he's still in demand in action films, and in terms of longevity, very few people can go toe-to-toe with the Italian Stallion.
Rocky Balboa? Never heard of him.
Look, it's the name, man. The Italian Stallion.
Here at JoBlo, we're pretty massive Stallone fans, which brings us to what we hope will be a long-lasting, all-new show here on JoBlo Videos, Sylvester Stallone Revisited, yes, from the makers of James Bond Revisited, where we take a look at most of the major films in his filmography, exploring what makes them great or not, whether they stand the test of time or not, and what they did for Sly's legacy. To start the series off, we're going to take a step back to the year 1981. Stallone was struggling to establish an identity outside of the Rocky franchise. He'd had huge hits with the first two movies in the series.
Lucky. So lucky. What you did was a miracle. You're the luckiest man on the face of the earth. I want you to know that, Stallion.
I look lucky.
But many of his other films hadn't quite worked. The big-budget union epic Fist for Norman Jewison saw Sly cast against type as a fictionalized Jimmy Hoffa. Contrary to popular belief, it actually did okay, but his follow-up Paradise Alley, which he also directed and sang the theme song to, was a notable flop. While Rocky II brought him back into the limelight, he had only middling success with the very, very underrated Nighthawks opposite Rutger Hauer and Billy D. Williams, which was butchered by its home studio, Universal Pictures, trimming out all of the extreme violence which made it such a hard-edged film. At this point, Sly flew to Europe to work with the legendary John Huston on the soccer prisoner of war drama Victory, where he co-starred with Michael Caine and Pele, unlikely in cast against type as a trio of soccer-playing inmates. According to Michael Caine's biography, Stallone was writing Rocky III the entire time they were making the film and more or less kept to himself. Of course, anyone who knows Sly's career knows that a few months after Rocky III hit theaters, he finally had a major non-Rocky hit with First Blood, which established his other iconic character, Rambo. But First Blood wasn't on the table when he started Rocky III, and his career was at a low ebb. Thus, the third installment of the franchise was an all-or-nothing attempt to catapult Sly back to the A-list. The film, famously, is about Rocky needing to find the Eye of the Tiger to defeat his hulking adversary, Clubber Lang, played by the iconic Mr. T. It's hard not to draw parallels between this film and Stallone's life. Just looking at Sly compared to his other films, you could see that his face has changed a little, with his drooping eye having been fixed to some extent. Burt Young's Polly even comments on this early in the film, saying Rocky's had his face all fixed up handsome. An even more insane transformation was going on with Stallone's body. In the film, he famously drops down to a lean and mean weight, almost a middleweight, as one of the announcers says, and Sly's body fat in the film hit a remarkable 2.8%. Madness. He also said he ate only 10 egg whites and a piece of toast a day, having a fruit every third day. His training, a 2-mile jog in the morning followed by 2 hours of weight training, a nap during the afternoon followed by 18 rounds of sparring, another weight training session, and swimming. He got down to 155 pounds. Sly himself commented on the autobiographical elements of the film later on. The whole point of the movie is that Rocky gets his ass kicked by Clubber Lang because, as Mickey tells him early in the film, you got civilized. He's no longer that scrappy Philly southpaw. Mickey warns him about this, but Rocky decides to go all out when Clubber provokes him to prove he's a champ, but turns what's supposed to be his retirement match into a garish spectacle, with public workouts where you can spot brother Frank Stallone as a singer and Sly's ex Sasha as the woman who asks him for a kiss, much to Adrian's displeasure.
Excuse me, can I get a kiss?
Yes. Get out of here, will you?
Just how over-the-top Rocky's life has gotten is pointed out by the opening montage, where we see Rocky has become this civilized commercial pitchman, even showing up on The Muppet Show with real footage of Sly hosting, he actually did host The Muppet Show, and Jim Henson overdubbing all of Kermit's dialogue to mention Rocky Balboa instead of Sylvester Stallone. He's even got his own arcade pinball machine, which was also the real deal. You can see just how cartoonish Rocky's world is when he agrees to fight an exhibition bout versus a famous wrestler named Thunderlips, who's played by Hulk Hogan. Fun fact, Vince McMahon's father Vincent fired the Hulkster from the WWF for taking this role, but his son brought him back into the fold 2 years later as the centerpiece wrestler of the very first WrestleMania, his tag team partner, who else but Mr. T. So Rocky gets his butt kicked by Clubber Lang and Mickey dies of a heart attack during the match. Things are going real bad for Rocky, but to be sure he's gone up against the force of nature, with Mr. T making his movie debut as Clubber Lang. Originally a bodyguard for Muhammad Ali, Mr. T was a last-minute addition to the cast when original casting choice Ernie Shavers didn't work out. It was T's idea to wear a mohawk and sideburns, the perfect choice to make for a larger-than-life trash-talking villain. Too trash-talking, in fact, because apparently at the premiere, Mr. T's mom was not too pleased about her son's behavior during the "Hey woman" scene, saying, "I did not raise you to talk to a lady like that," and storming out of the theater.
Hey woman! Hey woman! Listen here, since your old man ain't got no heart, maybe you'd like to see a real man. I bet you stay up late every night dreaming you had a real man, don't you?
This is also the movie that introduced Mr. T's signature line, "I pity the fool."
No, I don't hate Balboa, but I pity the fool, and I will destroy any man who tries to take what I got.
And let it be known that Mr. T, after this movie, never again played a villain. Kids loved Mr. T, and Mr. T himself always wanted to be a very positive role model, so in the A-Team, he's a real nice guy. So after Rocky gets destroyed by Clubber Lang and has to bury Mickey, he finds himself an unlikely ally, Carl Weathers' Apollo Creed, his adversary from the first two, who comes along to explain that Rocky's lost the eye of the tiger, offering to become his new trainer. And thus, one of the most iconic big-screen romances is born.
Eye of the tiger, man.
Why'd you have to come here?
Rocky heads to LA to train with Apollo and his trainer Duke, played by the great Tony Burton, who's in all the original Rocky movies but was too ill to be in Creed, although Wood Harris from The Wire plays his son, Duke Jr. This is where Rocky III becomes legendary, with Rocky going through a punishing training montage to get the eye of the tiger. It's not easy, and this is where Talia Shire really shines as Adrian, giving him all the encouragement he needs in the famous "I'm afraid" scene.
What's the truth, damn it?
I'm afraid, all right? You want to hear me say it? You want to break me down? All right, I'm afraid.
Sly and Shire really do have monster chemistry. So in the end, Rocky gets the eye of the tiger and wins the fight, putting Clubber Lang down pretty quickly. For many, Rocky III ranks as the second best in the series after the first, as it's the perfect combo of the grit and soul of the original and the larger-than-life aspect of Rocky IV. The film was a monster hit, earning $125 million domestically. Now, a second sequel being a big hit was rarely seen in those days. The law of diminishing returns meant that the franchises usually petered out after a movie or two. The Rocky movies kept getting bigger and bigger, like the 007 series. This, combined with the success of First Blood, put Sly on a different level of stardom. So let's break the movie down a bit. In terms of Sly's performance, not only did he push himself physically to the brink, but he also indulged in a little self-criticism and how, through script and direction, he emphasized how outlandish Rocky's life had gotten. For me, as a director, this might be Stallone's finest work. For action, the three main fights in the film are all great. The Thunderlips battle is largely played for humor, but the first fight with Clubber Lang is devastating. Finally, his comeback is as riveting as we all hoped. The supporting cast is top-notch too, with Carl Weathers again saying this was his favorite of the series as it gave his character depth. Talia Shire is aces as always, Burt Young is the comic relief with edge, while Burgess Meredith breaks your heart in his last turn as Mickey. Mr. T is great, so great in fact that apparently he didn't think he should lose, and holds a grudge to this day. Another lasting legacy of the film is the soundtrack. Bill Conti's score is great, but what does everyone remember from the movie? Survivor's iconic theme song, Eye of the Tiger. In fact, Stallone wanted to use Queen's Another One Bites the Dust, but it was too pricey. Joe Esposito actually wrote You're the Best for the movie, but it was rejected, only to turn up in The Karate Kid. It fell to Survivor to come up with the theme song, which, after the Rocky theme itself, is probably the piece of music most closely identified with the franchise. One of the movie's biggest lasting legacies is the Rocky statue, which still exists in Philadelphia. It was commissioned for the movie and Sly tried to donate it to the Philadelphia Museum of Arts. They didn't want this movie prop, but eventually, after public outrage, they caved, and of course now it's one of the biggest tourist attractions in the city. Rocky III, along with First Blood, did indeed kick off a second wave of stardom for Sly, which would dwarf all he experienced in the first. Big things were ahead for him, and while some may dismiss this as the one in which he fights Mr. T, it's a classic Rocky flick. On the Jonathan Ross talk show, Sylvester Stallone himself gave it a 9 on 10, and I gotta agree with Sly. Out of a possible 10 Stallones, this one gets 9 Stallones. It's a knockout!